We often hear that modern society has lost its moral compass, that we live in a degraded age compared to the principled civilizations of the past. But look at the historical benchmark for moral conviction: ancient Athens. Their response to a man asking uncomfortable ethical questions was to hand him a cup of poisoned hemlock. You don't execute a phantom. Sentencing Socrates to death proves that the collective conscience of Athens was intensely alive. So alive and so rigid that baking his inner moral voice as a literal threat to the city. Compare that to how we handle moral dissidents today. We rarely put them on trial or banish them. We simply scroll right past them. That is the difference between persecution and dissolution. Historical persecution punished an active conscience. Modern dissolution structurally removes our capacity to feel it in the first place. Human history is driven by two competing pathways. The empire current dominates the center of the system, constantly asking, what preserves power? The conscience current, the one asking, what is right, is treated as an anomaly and pushed to the margins. The real crisis is structural. We have engineered a society that bypasses its own guilt, effectively insulating power from the truth-tellers trying to reach it. The machinery for that bypass really started humming in the 1920s. Public deliberation gave way to mass commercial and political persuasion plastered across every available surface. The architect of this shift was Edward Bernays. He industrialized propaganda by figuring out how to engineer consent below the level of conscious thought. Bernays targeted what we can call the precognitive gate. There is a microscopic window, about 1/60th of a second, before your conscious, rational mind engages with a piece of information. By designing messaging that hits exactly in that fraction of a second, you can manufacture a public verdict before an individual's internal moral alarm even has time to go off. This is the failure to hear. Institutional power no longer needs to win a moral argument. It just prevents the moral question from reaching your conscious mind at all. By the 1950s, this engineered bypass evolved. It moved from public relations campaigns into the shadows of state-sponsored covert operations. Take the 1953 intervention in Iran. To remove Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, the operation relied on manufactured pretexts designed to trigger public anxiety. The narrative wasn't about the ethics of overthrowing an elected government. It was entirely engineered around stoking geopolitical fears of the Cold War, replacing moral truths with a curated panic. The 1954 Guatemalan coup against Jacobo Arbenz followed the same blueprint. Corporate interests were repackaged as strategic necessity, leaving no room for a public moral debate. The chief architect of this era was Allen Dulles, running the newly formed CIA. He was a high-functioning component of a machine built for moral evasion, one that predated his appointment and outlasted his career. The core mechanism of that system is plausible deniability. It is a formal tool for moral evasion, written directly into early national security directives. If a covert coup officially never happened, there is no public record. And without a record, there is no trial, no public debate, and no forum that can convene to judge the actions taken. Plausible deniability is the bureaucratic burial of conscience. It's a total failure to act, because the system successfully hides the crime from any court that could demand accountability. Zoom out and you see that this evasion reveals a massive architectural flaw in how both Western and Eastern philosophies handle power. Western democracies built a society based on utility, rights, and negative liberties. They protect individual freedom, but they never laid a foundational moral floor for the state itself. Eastern empires established a moral floor, like the conditional mandate of heaven, but they applied it only after the fact to justify whoever had just won the latest rebellion. These different flaws lead to the same outcome. When a floor is never laid, or when the rules are only applied to the loser of a war, power becomes its own justification. Both systems end up ratifying the victor. Without a permanent international forum to hold victors accountable in real time, we are left with a global reality where power wins the moment, and conscience only ever wins the eulogy. This is why modern ethics education falls flat. Lecturing students about morality is useless when the real world demonstrably rewards covert coups and plausible deniability. To actually fix this, we have to rebuild conscious efficiency through two distinct pillars. First is ambient formation. Conscience must be trained culturally, starting in the household, so that the precognitive gate is secured long before a person ever steps inside a corrupt institution. Second is the institutional forum. We need a standing, functional court that guarantees real, material consequences for major moral violations. A temporary, retroactive victor's court is not enough. We need a permanent, active, global forum with the authority to intercept atrocities while they are happening, not just penalize them after the dust settles. Effective conscience education goes beyond a standard classroom curriculum. It involves making the moral function the baseline operating system of a society, shifting it from a heroic exception to a functional constant.